All right, hey guys, so I thought I'd shoot another quick video here for you that you could check out so you can be a little bit more prepared for your paper that you're writing, and a little practice that you could actually use, or something that you could implement in order to stretch an original source that you find just a little bit further. Every single time that you're going out and trying to find a source, it doesn't have to be like this original search in which you're finding something perfect because of the perfect search terms you put in. In the last video, I talked a little bit about undervaluing serendipity a little bit. This is a strategy that you would implement maybe after serendipity has found you, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna walk you through this. The important thing is that you have an original source that kind of grabbed your attention from an initial search, right? So you have to have that, but that's really the only prerequisite to then stretching your sources out and getting more pretty easily. From one source, you might end up with, 2, 3, maybe even 4 other sources just from going through this exercise. So if you're struggling to find some sources right now, I'd highly recommend this. In class, you'll definitely want to bring sources with you for a little bit of a workshop on Thursday as we practice writing your papers a little bit and how to use your sources. Okay, so here's a little diagram that I put together for you to explain how you can stretch your sources a little bit, with here in the middle, this circle just representing whatever your original source might be, and then some strategies that you can use to kind of like stretch it out and get some more, right? So the first strategy that I have is, are there summaries of your original source that will help you understand it better, right? So lots of times, especially if it's a primary article, if it's a research article, the person writing the journal article actually did the research. Typically, there's going to be a follow-up. There will be some sort of summary that some other author is going to write after they've read that original research. So summaries really help for a few reasons. Number one, it condenses things down a little bit. Number two, it's usually some simpler language as a secondary source, right? So you might look and see, are there any summaries of your original source? Look for non-academic journals to see if you can find something where this summary has taken place. And that could be a second source, a second great source for you after you find this original source. Okay, so there's one strategy to stretch it out. My second that I would recommend to you off of this original source is, what else has this particular author written, right? So this is another source by the same author or authors as your original source, right? So this might be another primary article. It might be a book that they've written. It might be an opinion article that they have. Look up the author by name, and you can do that in EBSCO. You can do that through Google. There's no exact protocol for going through this, but really the second tip to stretching things out is go ahead and search for that author and see what else have they written. Lots of times they're experts in one area, which means that they've probably written multiple times about the thing that you found, right? So you would like access to those sources. So there's another way to stretch that original source even further, right? A third way of going about this might be, what important information informed the original source, right? So this is going to be referenced by your original source. So what you'd want to do is comb through their works cited. I find myself doing this a lot whenever I do or have done any research, is going into the footnotes and seeing, well, what inspired them, or what are they using? What is their evidence? And then going and finding that evidence. So here you're almost working backwards from your original source, right? So you're pulling out information that your source used, and hopefully maybe you end up using it in your paper. It's probably good information. It's probably been vetted if they've used it in a high quality original source. Right, so that's another thing to check out. And finally, what are other authors saying about your original source? Right, so this uses your original source as a source. So it might be another paper, right? It might agree or support your original source, or it might refute your original source. But what are other authors saying about it, right? So you could look for this in EBSCO or another engine and see who's using evidence from your paper, who's evaluating your original source, your original paper that you have here. Right, so you can stretch out an original source pretty far just by going through these exercises. I'll show you one quick example. I'd like to keep the video short, but I'll show you kind of what maybe this would look like. So here, what I have is an article that I found that was interesting to me, right? So this comes from Nature, and this was fairly recent. So that was March of this year of 2019. And this is about adopting a moratorium on heritable genome editing, right? So this is topical. Nature is a great source. It passes the Raven with flying colors. And then who I've got here are people like Eric Lander, who worked on the Human Genome Project, Feng Zhang, who is credited partly with the discovery of CRISPR, along with Jennifer Doudna, even though they were in separate labs. Doudna was in California, while Feng Zhang was in Massachusetts. You've got Emmanuel Charpentier, who worked very closely with Jennifer Doudna, right? So you've got like some very high ups here in the world of genome editing. So I want to go through and read this article, and this article would be my original source. This is what I'm using as my original source. Now, one of the strategies that I would definitely use here, right, as I'm reading through, there was one particular portion that I really liked here where they're quoting like here their fifth source, as you can see by this little note here of 5, right? And what they're doing is they're using evidence from the U.S. National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. So what I like to do after I read an article is I just go through and here's their work cited, right? So here's the sources that they've used. The one that really grabbed my attention, sort of right down here, you guys might be able to see this, right, with point 5 here. Their fifth source. This is the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. And this is about human genome editing, science, ethics, and governance. That's probably a source that I would at least like to check out. Now, it doesn't mean that I have to, like, go through the whole thing, read the whole thing, make sure that I understand everything exactly, right? That's not what I need to do necessarily. But I kind of want to see what this is, and maybe if I have access to it, check it out. So it looks like, right, so this is from the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. I could buy the paperback for $68, and I'd rather not do that. You could download a free PDF, it looks like. But you know what I'm actually going to go do is I'd like to check out and see if I actually put this into EBSCO. Is there anything that will pop up? And I'm actually just going to use a basic search here, right? So I'm just pasting in that title. And let's see. Okay, so we get a couple things popping up here. One is a periodical, and another is an academic journal. Is caution enough? So if I click on that, looks like the article presents authors' views on human genome editing, science, ethics, and governance by the National Academy of Sciences. Okay, so this is separate authors' views of that report, right? So I could certainly see this being a source that I'd want to look at and read through. So I'd probably actually go through and download this PDF and check it out. That seems like a pretty interesting source. Let's go back and look at that other one. U.S. Attitudes on Human Genome Editing. Although views on human genome editing differ, all want public engagement. So that seems kind of interesting too. So I might click on this and download that PDF. And now what I've done here, if you see guys, is I went into those footnotes, right? And what I want to do is just stretch that original source a little bit further. So that's all coming from inspiration from here, right? And that's just one of the strategies that I'm showing you. You might also look and see, we found an article of people reviewing this. We might look and see, what else has Eric Lander written, right? So he's one of the authors on this, which makes this kind of unique. But let's do an advanced search and see what we can't find. If we say Eric Lander, right? And gene editing, something like that. And let's do a search. Scientists call for a moratorium to block gene-edited babies. Okay, that looks like that might be the same, maybe the same deal, right? So that comes from the Wall Street Journal. The heroes of CRISPR. So this one's interesting. This is an academic journal, and this is by Eric Lander in Cell of January 2016, right? So let's see what we got here. 3 years ago, scientists reported CRISPR technology can enable precise and efficient genome editing. Interesting. So it looks like Eric Lander had originally written something about the heroes of CRISPR, which I find intriguing. So I'm going to kind of like, I'm going to go through and just highlight this portion. So it's coming from Cell magazine. It's a quality journal that it looks like Lander wrote in 2016. And let's just search that. Yeah, right. So here we've got this from Cell, written by Eric Lander. So here's the article. You could grab a PDF. Boom, there it is, 11 pages long. And you might be able to read through this too, right? So this might actually be a good source for you. And this is a perspective article. So there you go, guys. Sorry this video went a little longer than what I was planning. But that's a great exercise to go through, right? So try to find extra sources that all stem from original source. In class with you, bring your sources so that we can stretch them even further. And before you know it, you're writing a 500-page research paper pretty easily. Okay, I hope that's helpful.